Hello and welcome to the Jackass, your Swansea City podcast. I'm your host, Steve and Carroll. We're treating you this week. We've obviously we did do a podcast fairly recently, but we decided we needed to get another guest on, given that we had some fairly big Swans news, obviously, recently in terms of takeover. So I'm very pleased to say that Ian Mitchelmore has agreed to come on the podcast again. Ian, thanks a lot for coming on. How are you?
I wouldn't call it a treat, Steve, but yeah, appreciate the sentiment. Thanks very much, mate. Yeah, very good. Thanks, mate. Especially after it's Wednesday at the moment, so yeah, after last night's Wales win, and yeah, good positive times, mate.
Yeah, definitely. We'll kick off by talking about Wales, I think, and then we'll build up to the Swan stuff, and then a general look about how things are going at the moment. So obviously Wales have had two games this week. The situation really was that Turkey in the drive-in seat in the group. Wales probably needing to win in Turkey, so we thought, to have a chance of winning Nations League Group B4, I think it was, and then obviously a promotion to A. So we travelled to Turkey, Kayseri. Sounded like a mission to get there, but there was good travelling support. I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that Turkey had the better of the game, but Wales did come away with what proved to be an excellent 0-0 draw in the Lions' Den, really, wasn't it? So a really good result, I would say.
Yeah, the result is definitely the right word, isn't it, Steve? I think, certainly before the campaign, you look, that's the hardest game on paper, Turkey away. And a clean sheet as well was excellent. The only downside, I think you probably thought at that point that was the end of us in terms of our chances of finishing first, because you expected them to get a result or even beat Montenegro. So it kind of made me go into the Finland game thinking, well, as long as we win and get second, I'll be happy. Then, funnily, how that flipped on its head in terms of them getting beat 3-1 in Montenegro. So, yeah, it was a great result in Turkey, but it didn't quite feel like it when you sort of thought about the overall picture. But in terms of staying unbeaten and winning 3 and drawing 3 in total under Craig Bellamy and not being beaten, I mean, that represents a fantastic campaign. And obviously the ramifications being in League A again, playing better opposition in terms of the playoff rankings and everything else, being in pot 2 for the World Cup draw, the qualifying draw, it's just had a huge knock-on effect. So yeah, thanks very much to Montenegro. What a job they did. And yeah, great all-round camp. Once again, 4 points from 6 in those fixtures is no mean feat.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look back to June, I mean, even March really, where we were all, bitterly disappointed not to make the Euros in Germany, and then the summer was a disaster. It resulted in the change of manager, obviously, and Craig Bellamy coming in. You just got to say that you could not have imagined us winning this group at that point, could you? It's been some turnaround and a really good start for the new manager, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned it there that the playoff was really disappointing, especially after beating Finland so convincingly, and then on the whole a pretty decent performance against Poland, and then losing on penalties. But that summer was just an absolute mess, and it culminated with Rob Page losing his job in the end, which many, and you've said it yourself in the past, was too late anyway. But it did happen, and it gave a chance for a reset, which Craig Bellamy's come in and done. And I think, had people have seen this campaign, had we finished second, and even if Turkey had have won against Montenegro and we finished second in the group, I think people still would have seen it as a good building platform to go into those qualifiers next year. But to get that promotion and the bonuses that I've mentioned that come with it, it's just a huge plus. So yeah, hugely positive so far, and it's been nice to see other players come into the camp and have an impact. Particularly the Swansea lads, Liam Cullen getting his first couple of goals and man of the match, a great performance from him, in fairness. Ollie Cooper, obviously before his injury, had a big impact under Craig Bellamy, as has Ben Cabango as well. So nice to see those lads come in, and same with like maybe Mark Harris, a couple of others who have been fringe players lately. There's a lot of faith being shown in them by Craig Bellamy, which maybe wasn't the case under Rob Page as much. So that's been a plus sign, and you'd like to think that's only going to benefit you when you've got the likes of, say, Ethan Ampadu, Aaron Ramsey, David Brooks, all these lads fully fit and firing again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it did feel like under Page we had probably about 13 or 14 players, and then you'd probably have your likes of Liam Cullen, Josh Sheehan, and those guys that they'd be in the squad, but they'd know if it was a competitive game, they had pretty much no chance of playing. So it must be really encouraging for those guys now, because Craig Bellamy has shown quite a lot of faith in them. I mean, I don't know what his best team is, though. That's the interesting thing now, because he likes to make so many changes, and you can't really predict what 11 he's going to go for. I mean, I personally would like to see a more settled team as we come into the World Cup qualifiers, because I don't think making X amount of changes all the time is great. I think he's done the right thing in terms of the Nations League, because you want to have a look at what you've got. But I mean, if I'm making a couple of changes between qualifiers, I can see that making sense. But do you think that might settle down now as we come into the qualifiers next year?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit more on those games, and of course, because he's had this time to, I don't want to say experiment, because he still wanted to play well and win games, but ultimately it has been in getting to know his squad and give certain players a chance. So there's been a case of saying, let's try certain things out and certain styles of play and patterns and players, and in terms of personnel and that as well. So I think that was the big luxury of having this Nations League campaign, where we knew we'd be in a strong position to not get relegated, even if it meant finishing third and having a playoff. So, the ramifications, had it have gone not so well, it wouldn't have been a disaster had things not have gone so brilliantly. But yeah, I think it just gives him a much better chance to try and do what he really wants to do next. Well, starting in March now with the qualifiers, because they're going to be earlier than we probably thought they were going to be. But, when you do have those key players, like you say, Wilson, Brennan Johnson, these lads, Joe Roden, Ben Davis, Nico Williams, when they're consistently playing, supplement that with the players who can come off the bench and make an impact. And then obviously even players like Sorba Thomas, who probably quite a few of us, maybe even myself to an extent, kind of wrote off in a Wales shirt. They're lads now that can come and make an impact as well. So like you said, instead of having that core of, say, 12, 13, 14, you've now got sort of 17, 18 who can all contribute. And, when it does settle down, if he needs to change things, he can, in the same way that if you play 2 games in a week, if he does need to change it with a 3 or 4 day turnaround, he can as well. So all in all, yeah, you just got to look at it, and there's a really positive 2-3 months campaign in the Bellamy so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, we come on to the World Cup qualifiers next, and the real positive from this now, from winning the group, is it would take an astronomical turn of events for Wales to not at least have a playoff for the World Cup. So it's great to have that safety net there, really, isn't it? Because you just don't know what the draw will pan out. I mean, we might get a more favourable draw where you'd be in with a chance of winning the group, or you could instantly get drawn in with Spain as an example, and instantly you just think to yourself, you're already playing for second anyway. So it's just good to have that there, isn't it? Because you just don't know how a campaign can pan out.
Yeah, 100%. And before we started recording, we were sort of discussing in terms of who your pot one side is, because if you get a powerhouse like a Spain, Germany, you're kind of writing off top spot straight away. Whereas, if you can still compete for second and know you're going to have that safety net of the playoffs, which, we're not snobs, we'll take it. We've used it before to get to the World Cup playoff final when we beat Ukraine, and in the same the Nations, the Euro 2024 playoffs earlier this year. It's fine if that's how we've got to qualify. Then it's not a problem. It's actually a great thing for us to have, because we've missed over a number of years when we've had those close shaves. So to have that safety net is certainly huge for Craig Bellamy. And again, it might even give him more chance to give other players a go in 2025, as it will be in terms of the ones that maybe haven't had as much game time. A bit like Aaron Ramsey, Ollie Cooper, who he clearly likes. He obviously played a few games and then got the injury. So yeah, once those lads get a chance to come back in firing, then he can really attack that campaign and know he's kind of got that safety net if he needs to fall on it.
Yeah, absolutely. The draw is on the 13th of December. So if you don't know yet, that's there's your information for the evening. And yeah, it'll be a very interesting night. And I'm sure my bank balance will take a hit when some flights get booked just before Christmas. So yeah, we'll park that for now, and we'll move back on to Swansea City. So the big news, Mitch, over the last period was the announcement, really, of the change in ownership of the club. Jason Levy and Steve Kaplan are going to move on, and Andy Coleman, Brett Cravath, and a few others are going to buy them out, and they'll be running the club. I mean, we expect this to be confirmed quite shortly, don't we? But I mean, it's certainly not going to be a loss, is it? Levy and Kaplan moving on.
Yeah, I mean, the reaction to the initial announcement, which came from The Athletic 2 weeks ago, was it? I mean, that tells the whole story, I think. I mean, it's been just over 8 years of mixed messages, mismanagement, decline, mistakes, apologies, then back to the mistakes and repeat. And I just think fans, very early on were frustrated and disappointed with the way things were going. And as times wore on, we've seen it with the likes of Steve Cooper and certainly with Russell Martin, with the way that they spoke about the situations. they weren't happy either. Neither were people on the ground in Swansea. So, yeah, I think on the face of it, this looks positive news for Swansea. Obviously, the big question, and we probably won't be able to answer this for at least another few years yet, but what does the future hold for them in terms of the ownership of Andy Coleman and Brett Cravath and Nigel Morris, who are obviously already involved, and then Jason Cohen, who's joining in as well. So, how's that going to look? Who's the football knowledge there? Who's got that background of UK, the British football market, like we've seen with, for example, particularly Trevor Birch or maybe a Julian Winter or Mark Allen, who they've had in recent years. That's probably a position that needs filling somehow, and I'm not sure on the plans for that. But obviously, with Paul Watson leaving as well, it does leave a void. So yeah, there's questions around that to be answered, which I'm sure the chairman Andy Coleman will address at some point once this is all ratified. But yeah, as you said, mate, I think all indications are that this could be done very, very, very soon, maybe even before the Leeds game. But yeah, certainly in the next week or two, I'd imagine.
Yeah, that's good news. I think it needs to be signed off really now and announced, and I think hopefully a fans forum will then take place where we can try and get some more answers really. But they're not going to be the loss of the two original ones from the Levy and Kaplan. It's not really going to be mourned at all, as we've said, and but there are those concerns, aren't there, that you just don't know with new ownership how it's going to pan out. And as you say, you can't really answer it for another few years. But I mean, it does feel as if some poor decisions have been made recently. Obviously, Paul Watson has now departed, which seems to be a good thing, I would say, as well. But there's still those question marks, aren't there, about who's making the decisions, as you say. And I think, it would be I would feel far happier if, as you say, Trevor Birch or someone like that was running the club, really. But that's not going to change in the near future, I don't think, is it?
Wouldn't have thought so. I mean, they did say when Paul Watson, it was announced that he was leaving the club or had left the club, that they were looking to fill that role. So, like you said, we do need to hear from Andy Coleman on this matter. And obviously, now that he has gone public with the takeover situation, I'd imagine once that's all completed and had the approval from the EFL, which sounds like it's going to be absolutely no problem and could be very, very soon, that'll be the right time for him to then have his say on, firstly, on that takeover situation and what it means for the club going forward, but certainly to address previous matters that have gone untouched so far, which on the whole has been unlike him. I believe you've been to some of the sessions with him already in terms of those one-on-ones, and he regularly communicated online and through club platforms, but it's not something he's done lately, which has been a bit of a shame because there's been a lot of matters to address, particularly that Paul Watson one. So yeah, time will tell, but I don't think it'll be too long before we do hear from him, and he'll have to answer those questions that fans want answering, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I do wonder if the quiet spell has been because of these things going on behind the scenes, and maybe they didn't want to get into it until there's actually something to properly talk about. And obviously now that there will be very soon, so hopefully some of our questions will be answered. But I mean, talking of Paul Watson, I mean, there's been a lot of poor transfer decisions, I would say, at Swansea over the last 18 months, and we've discussed about it before, really. I mean, he again isn't going to be regarded as much of a loss, is he? I think the club need to try and replace him with somebody better, I would say, because the track record was not very good, was it?
Yeah, you look at, I think he joined, was it a couple of days before or after Michael Duff? So that would have been in June 2023. And, that summer transfer window was an absolute shocker for the club in terms of the personnel. It didn't fit the club's style. It probably did fit more of Michael Duff's, but obviously we all know that he wasn't a manager that fitted the club style, and that was kind of proven in the fact that he'd gone by December having won, I think off the top of my head, was it 5 league games in 19 or
5.
something? So yeah, so all those things combined, and let's not forget who was partly responsible for that appointment, Andy Coleman, and credit to him, he did put his hands up and apologised for that and said he'd learnt his mistakes. And my own opinion on this, I'm sure many agree, some might not, but I thought they did get it right then when they pulled the trigger on Michael Duff and brought in Luke Williams, who I personally think is a fantastic fit for the football club, a great guy first and foremost, but a really top coach who, with a good squad in place and a good structure around him at the club, and with some support, I think he could do some really good things at the club. Whether he's going to get that, it remains to be seen, as we've said. But yeah, coming back to the Watson issue specifically, I mean, that was it all led into one big summer where, you know, he was a driving force in that. And, you know, for him to publicly say that there was no recruitment structure in place, and yet they made, I think it was 13 signings initially, then Yannick Bolasie came in a bit later. You know, is that a sensible thing to do when you say there's no recruitment arm in place, and then the majority of those don't do well and don't get game time or go out on loan or then get sent out the year after? You know, I think that was a pretty awful window, and it reflected very badly on him. So, yeah, to see him leave little more than a year after joining was probably not a big surprise.
Yeah, not a surprise, and not bad news either from my point of view. So, yeah, I mean, what do you make of Swansea so far this season? Obviously, in mid-table, 19 points from 15 games. Very good defensively, I think is fair to say, but going forward, leaving a bit to be desired. But you know, it looks like a season of more mid-table obscurity, really, doesn't it, from what we've seen so far? But it's frustrating from my point of view that I look at it and think, well, defensively, it's more than good enough for top six, because obviously we're not letting in many goals. But going forward, obviously, that's what's causing problems, really, isn't it? We haven't scored anywhere near enough goals.
Yeah, it's a really odd one, because when Luke Williams joined, obviously, and I saw a fair amount of Notts County covering Wrexham, things like that as well. I kind of expected the opposite in terms of defence and attack. I thought they could have been quite leaky, but they'd be fun to watch in terms of going forward and maybe creating lots of chances and scoring goals. But he's kind of done the opposite to what I expected, which in some ways is positive, because if you can sort that defence out with, you know, once a few more players are fully fit, you know, Ollie Cooper's been out, as I mentioned. Eom, I think that's been a blow. You know, Xander Potnick's taking a bit of time to get up to speed with things, and Liam Cullen, obviously, you know, great game for Wales, but, you know, in terms of scoring goals for Swansea, he's found it difficult, and, you know, there's been a lack of service, in fairness to the forwards as well. So, you know, you need a bit more from Ronaldo at times, Bianchini maybe as well. So, yeah, it's not quite got there yet. You can see that there's a lot to build on, and there's more to come, but when is it going to come? That's the question. And that was the question that Luke Williams was consistently asked during that barren run of not scoring goals. But like you say, defensively, they've been outstanding. I think Harry Darling and Ben Cabango having a brilliant spell, and it's high time that they get their contract sorted as well. And then you chuck in Josh Tymon, who I think's been a really good addition, struggled under Michael Duff, but he's certainly improved this year under Luke Williams. And then Josh Key as well. Obviously, he's had a few injury problems. So all of a sudden, you've got the make of a good defence. And, you know, I think it's most important to mention Lawrence Vigouroux, what a signing he's been. I think he's been one of the best goalkeepers in the Championship. So, you know, he's good with the ball at his feet. But first and foremost, he's just been an excellent goalkeeper. Some of the saves he's made, and he's a good presence as well. He's clearly a good communicator too. So, yeah, the back line, that's a big positive to have that, because it was something I wasn't entirely sure they would have. So at least it gives you a platform to build on. You know, if you can draw a few games and keep clean sheets, that's a good place to start. And then if you can add that Stardust further forward, then you can go from there, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at it, the back four, the keeper, Grimes and Franco in midfield. It's the makings of a good side, isn't it? It's just those forward positions. It really, and I've got to be honest, I don't think the league is as strong as it was last year either. So I think it could be an opportunity for somebody this year to really do well if they can bring a couple of players in January. So I think that feels like a bit of a challenge for Swansea, doesn't it? Can they bring in a couple of game changers during the transfer window? If they could, it could really make a difference, couldn't it?
100%. Yeah, and you'd like to think with this takeover, it should be done well before then. Sounds like there's going to be a significant investment into the club. Now, how much of that is in terms of a transfer budget for Luke Williams, I don't know, but you'd like to think there'll be something in January, particularly, as you say, it's nowhere near as strong a league as it was last season, for example. This year, you probably look at maybe Leeds as the strong favourites for promotion. Burnley, you know, they've got a good squad, but maybe not as good as they have been. Sheffield United will be up there. Sunderland have started brilliantly, but are they going to maintain that? You don't know. So, yeah, there certainly feels like there's an opportunity there, because even after was it 5.5 games or whatever number of hours it was without scoring a goal, 2 wins in the space of 4 days, and Swansea was straight back in the mix for playoff places. So it feels like it's not going to take a massive amount to keep yourself in the mix. And yeah, just 1 or 2 additions who can hit the ground running. You know, you look at Cyrus Christie, he's a Championship built player. So in terms of squad depth, I think that was a good addition. But maybe just 1 or 2 more of those in January could be the difference between having another kind of flat season, maybe in the top of the bottom half, to genuinely being challengers for a top 6.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to come on to another player really now. I don't think he'll be coming back in January, but I do wonder if this might happen further down the line. I mean, Connor Roberts made some comments during the international break about obviously wanting to come back to Swansea at some point. I mean, he's out of contract in the summer. I mean, from my point of view, this would be a no-brainer. I mean, you do look at each signing, with its own merits, really, and you could argue that Swansea maybe don't need a right back at this moment in time. But I'd also look at it as Luke Williams has talked up Josh Key in the same sentence as Gareth Bale recently, and maybe he would move forward to playing on the wing, and then Connor Roberts could obviously play as a full back. And I mean, if we're going to be honest about it, we just discussed now, haven't we, the lack of forward options really for Swansea. I mean, do you think that would be a good move? I mean, like I say, on a free transfer, if he's on, a reasonable first team wage, I mean, it's a no-brainer really, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, the Krynan Cafu and the Gareth Bale-esque Josh Key, it doesn't sound too bad, does it? But I'm with you. On a free agent, he'd be on a Bosman transfer, he'd be back home. It's the club he loves and adores and grew up supporting. Financially, I can't imagine his wage would be too much, especially when you're not paying a transfer fee as well. So, yeah, for him to be saying that publicly at this stage, and bearing in mind, he's not had the best of times always at Burnley, even though he was part of a team that got promoted. He's been on loan away at Leeds and stuff as well. So it's not a move that's been a bad one for him. It's just not worked out probably as he'd have liked. Maybe a bit like when we saw Dan James go to the Premier League and things like that as well. So, but yeah, I think it fits all parties because he's only 29 years of age at the moment. So he's still got a fair few seasons. If he gets a 3-year deal, he's going to see that out and maybe even longer. So yeah, no-brainer is probably the word I'd use. And it's one that seems entirely feasible, doesn't it?
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, I think if Burnley were to go up, I mean, I'm not sure if they will. They're clearly not a bad side, but they're nowhere near the levels I would say that they were 2 years ago, last time they went up. But obviously, Connor Roberts last season, as you say, spent some time at Leeds. It would feel as if they don't really believe in him for the Premier League, and he'll probably be on a fair wage. They may look at it as an opportunity to, move him out because of obviously the wages, and then if that was to happen, then it would naturally, I would expect the Swans to be targeting him. And, if he's going to, the fact is, if a lot of players like him, they'll leave here to go and play in the Premier League. But I mean, if they're not playing in the Premier League and they're playing in the Championship, the same division as the Swans, I mean, I think it's fairly natural that they would probably rather play here. But I mean, it's not going to happen in January, obviously, is it? But certainly one to look for. And look, I think as we've said, going forward, we have issues. A lot of the players that we've signed recently, overseas players particularly, not ones that we can have massive opinions on because we haven't seen. But that's the one thing with someone like Connor Roberts, isn't it? We all really know what he's about. So it's a fairly safe signing, you would think, in that sense as well, rather than much of a gamble, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. Like you said, Vipotnik, he's on a free agent, but you're still taking a bit of a punt on a bit of an unknown player on these shores. And as I say, Bianchini, it happens more so with foreign players. Look at Joel Pirro, and obviously that turned out brilliantly. So, you can have hits, but you have some losses as well, as we saw maybe last summer with somebody like Nikola Kurevic or something who's now gone out on loan. So, but yes, it does exactly what it says on the tin with Connor Roberts. You know what you get in someone who can play right back, right wing back. He can play further forward as well if needed. But as you've already alluded to, Luke Williams has spoken up Josh Key, so maybe he's touting him for a role further up as well. So, yeah, it would just give more depth to a squad that certainly needs that. You said earlier on that back four, the goalkeeper, Gonçalo Franco and Matt Grimes, it's got the basis of a really good squad. And to go to that next level, it does need that extra bit of quality and that extra bit of depth, which, if this investment is as good as it seems on the face of it and as good as Andy Coleman is saying, then that would be the aim, to make that step up from having a good squad to having a strong squad, and then suddenly you become a contender, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens in January in terms of who's available. I mean, what I discussed in the car on the way home last night is David Brooks going to have a loan because he's not having much spell. But if I'm honest, I can't see him coming here. But I think whoever got him, for example, would have done some very good business. He'd certainly walk into our team. But moving on now to one
thinking,
mate. Go on.
Well, that was wishful thinking, mate. Steady on.
He's definitely not going to come here, is he? But he's going to go somewhere, I would have thought. And whoever gets him, like I say, will have done some good business, I would have thought. But yeah, moving on now to one of Conor Roberts' former clubs, Leeds. They are our next opponents on the weekend. I mean, Mitch, you've already alluded to it. They're probably the best team in the division, aren't they? They haven't run away with it or anything at this stage. Sunderland obviously are top, probably partly because the Leeds keeper had a shocker against them, didn't he, if you remember?
Yeah.
But this is going to be a really tough game for Swansea, isn't it? And of course, the old returning player curse that seems to strike so many times. I mean, there's a few candidates here, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite as bad as it has been, but obviously there's no Conor Roberts there after his loan finished, and I know he's not a former player, but one we always keep an eye on in terms of Wales with Ethan Ampadu. He's not playing either, so that's clearly been a big loss for them. But yeah, Joe Rodon, he's due a goal at some stage, and he's finally going to get one eventually. Then Dan James, I mean, had the injury, but he's come back looking pretty strong already, isn't he? So yeah, you never know, but I do love covering the Swansea v Leeds games. They've always been good ones. I was up at Ellen Road for the Wayne Routledge one under Steve Cooper, and I remember the home game, the 2-2 and the Graham Potter, I think it was.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they're really good occasions, aren't they? And in fairness, even the one with Pablo Hernandez scoring at the Liberty, the late winner for Leeds as they got promoted. Bad result for the Swans, but it was a great occasion and what it meant in terms of them. So yeah, they always seem to be good games, and their support is outstanding as well. So there'll be a packed away end, and maybe a few more bums on seats with the Swans as well. With if this takeover news does go through, and it just feels like there's a little bit more positivity around the club, even after a defeat to Burnley, which came in very controversial circumstances. But on the whole, you'd probably felt that Swansea deserved the point, and didn't quite get it. But before that, 2 good wins as well. So yeah, the mood's definitely changed a little bit compared to how it was maybe a few weeks ago. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, same here. I mean, as you say, the Swansea Leeds games do seem to provide on occasions. I always remember a game in 2007 where we were the top 2 in League One and they were on -15, but they could have, if they'd beaten us that day, they would have gone above us in spite of the -15. So shows you how well they'd done at that point. But we ended up outplaying them, really. 1-3-2 with 10 men. The atmosphere to that point was by far the best that had ever been at the stadium. It was probably one of the first times where it started to feel a bit more like home and reproducing the old Vetch atmosphere. And it proved to be a turning point in the season because Leeds ended up on a bad run after we'd beaten them, and we went from strength to strength and ended up winning the league by 16 points from Leeds. So obviously that 15 was that wouldn't have been enough for them. So that crucial extra point was meant that Leeds couldn't moan about anything really. But the good thing for Swansea is, though, once this game is out of the way, on paper there are some more favourable fixtures. There's a trip to Derby. Portsmouth come to South Wales. Obviously, they're really struggling. And then Luton away, who are really struggling as well. So hopefully there'll be a chance for some points there, won't there? Even if the game with Leeds on Sunday doesn't go our way.
Yeah, like you say, you'd probably say before the game against Leeds that any positive result, whether draw or win, but a draw, you'd probably take that right now, I'd imagine. But then, yeah, like you say, looking forward, Derby, they've been quite strong at home. Fair play to them, and that is a midweeker, isn't it? Is it a Wednesday night, isn't it? So
yeah, that's right.
It's a tricky one, but you'd like to think you can go there and deliver. And then Portsmouth, they've had a really tough season so far. So playing them at home, and as you say, Luton have had a really difficult time. I think I saw that when they beat Cardiff, there wasn't much in that game, but they managed to grind out a win. But they've not been great, and then. Yeah, I think even after that, it's Plymouth away who have kind of, they've had some positive results, but they just can't seem to get any kind of momentum. So, yeah, all won't be lost if they do get beat by Leeds, but hopefully they can just rely on that defence and, just try and keep them out as best you can. If you can get a 0-0 draw or you keep it tight, I think Luke Williams would be very happy going into what is a slightly more favourable run, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the last game was tough, as we say, at Burnley, and now facing Leeds, it's a couple of tough games there, but I mean, you've got to play everybody twice, as we know, so it's nicer then to come into fixtures that do look a little bit more favourable. We're going to wrap up the pod there because obviously we reviewed the previous games on the last podcast, so there isn't a huge amount more to say. But Mitch, thank you very much for joining us as ever. It's always a pleasure to have you on. I'm sure we will do a podcast again soon. Unlikely to be next week because with there being 3 games, the quick turnaround probably means that we won't be able to squeeze one in. So I'm sure we'll try and get one on again after the Portsmouth game. So it'll be early December. Hopefully by then we'll have some confirmation over the takeover, and we can discuss anything else that has happened in that time. But as ever, thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye for now.